the last major Old Testament covenant in the Bible is a covenant made to David. It is also the next major scene of the Bible in the ways that I'm going to be describing it. So David was the second king of Israel. Saul was the first king. David was of pure heart, so he was anointed during the reign of Saul, and God made a covenant to him because of his pure heart. And we'll see as the story goes why some of his intentions and some of the ways that God kind of, even though of his good heart, he kind of changes his intentions. So the David covenant, how the story goes is pretty much David wants to build the temple. So the temple is going to be where God dwells with the Israelite people, where his presence actually is. Within the Holy of Holies in the temple is actually where God's presence is believed to be at the time. So the temple is kind of this. David says, I have this beautiful house that I'm living in, yet you are in a tent, which was the tabernacle, and so on. So they try to David tries to build the temple for God. We see God a lot throughout the Bible. Doesn't necessarily always want to be controlled. God tends to control his own story because he is all powerful and knows what's best. So what he does is instead he says, David, you will not build the temple for me. However, I'm going to make this covenant with you. The covenant has 3 parts, and they're all about his descendants. 1, his descendants will build the temple. 2, his descendants will reign forever. And 3 is that Jesus will be in his line. So it's interesting actually how this first and second one, they are fulfilled in very concrete in certain ways, but also Jesus actually fulfills them in another way as well, and we'll see how that is in a moment here. So first of all, number 1 is completed when Solomon builds the temple. But also, if we think about the temple as God's presence throughout the story of the Bible starts in the garden. But then kind of the next places we see it are with individuals. But then during the Exodus story, we really start to see a tangible sign of his presence, where he begins in the burning bush. But then from the burning bush, when the Exodus is happening, he becomes a pillar of cloud during the day and of flame during the night. That pillar of cloud comes to rest on Mount Sinai. Then God's presence moves into the tabernacle from Mount Sinai, which is this tent in the desert that can be moved so that they can keep wandering through the desert. And after the tabernacle, eventually it ends up in the temple when Solomon builds it. So interestingly, we continue to see God's presence move in different ways, be different forms, things like this. But eventually, after the temple, what we'll see God's presence manifest in the world is Jesus. So in a way, Solomon built the temple, but also one of David's descendants, which is Jesus, also literally becomes the temple incarnate. So that's really awesome. We see that fulfilled in multiple ways and things that David couldn't have even understood, but God was working in that entire time. 2, his descendants will reign forever. Both his descendants were the kings of Judah, mostly. also, we come to see that Jesus is his descendant. So indeed, his line will reign forever. Literally forever. So this is a really amazing promise. The third being that Jesus will be in his line. We see that come true. Chronicles actually gets us, the books of Chronicles, the genealogy in them actually gets us all the way from Adam to a character named Zerubbabel, which if you're not familiar, we will see in the book of Esther, Ezra. And from Adam to Zerubbabel, which that's actually only 10 generations away from Jesus. So we already almost have the entire chronology in the Old Testament, and the rest of these are filled in all the way from Adam to Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. It shows that we have from Adam to David, and from David to Jesus, which is pretty cool. God fulfills his promise in this way. So all that's left after this, we've seen a lot of the Old Testament promises, and now we're going to see what the new promise is, the new covenant, which often it is heard in church that they say there's a new covenant in his blood when Jesus did at the Last Supper kind of offered up his body and blood. So this is going to be a really amazing covenant that ties together all of these covenants and all of the events of the Bible. So if you want to see that, check out the next video.